Hey guys, welcome back to The Best Medicine. If you're interested in plant medicine and more specifically MDMA therapy, then this episode is for you. There are a ton of new studies and incredibly promising research coming out about MDMA therapy, specifically with helping veterans with PTSD and depression. Now, our next guest is an unlikely expert in this field. He is one of the most intelligent and unique human beings I've ever met and has a wild backstory, and chances are you've heard of him. His name is Tucker Max. Tucker's written over 4 New York Times bestsellers, and 3 of those hit #1. His publishing house helped write an incredible book called A Dose of Hope. I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite books. It's co-written by Dr. Dan Engel, and it chronicles one patient's journey during an MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. I remember in college, all my friends and I reading his best-selling book, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Now, while Tucker is best known for his wild stories chronicled in this book, his life has taken an incredible, more fulfilling turn as he is now a father and a husband and a leader in the space of spreading the education of MDMA-assisted therapy. We had a lot of fun in this convo. We jump right into what's real and what's not when it comes to plant medicine. And 10 minutes in, we talk about a huge life shift for Tucker and Tucker's experience with psychedelics that changed his life forever. I hope you enjoy the show, and make sure to go follow us at the Best Med Podcast on all platforms.
Once you do the medicine, and the goal of psychedelics in terms of healing trauma is essentially it opens a space and allows you to feel all the feelings that you've pushed away your whole life and all the difficult stuff and face it, address it, process it, and let it go. That's what you should be doing on psychedelics if you actually want to heal from trauma.
Okay.
What people who spiritual bypass do is they'll go in and they don't want to face that, which is actually okay. There's no shame on that. You're not doing it wrong if you don't want to face your stuff. But basically what you're doing, you're just doing drugs, right? Which is okay, fine. Nothing wrong with that even. But then if you don't face any of your stuff, you don't do any of the emotional work, and you can still have a peak experience. Like you can still feel connected to God and source and the universe, and you can have all these amazing emotions. And so you come out of your session, and someone who's spiritual bypassed will feel like they have, or tell themselves the story. They've done a lot of work and they're spiritually advanced and evolved now, but all they did was have a peak experience. They didn't actually feel any of their repressed shame or grief or sadness or any of that, or even joy or whatever. They didn't face any of that. And so, yeah, Austin, you called it. I think Austin right now might be the international home of spiritual bypass, because what happened, man.
Welcome to Austin.
Dude,
change the sign.
It happened in, it was about an 8-month period in COVID where all of those types of people were almost all in California, and they all came, not to Texas, they came to Austin, right? And so, it's like overnight, the Austin, dude, I've lived in Austin for 13, 14 years, right? Like I was part of the first wave. Austin used to be kind of a provincial backwater town. And I was part of the first wave of sort of cool coastal people who actually got here and stayed. Right? Not the first, but I was part of that group. Yeah. And it's funny, the serious old school Austin people of 20 and 30 years ago that I know, that I'm friends with, who left Austin 15 years ago, joke about you were when you got there, we left, right?
We knew the town was going to shit.
It's true. But they were honestly, bless their hearts, they're the kind of dirty hippies who are okay with a shit scrub town. Okay, cool, great. I got to Austin because it was there was so much I loved about Texas and whatever. And so the group of people who came about 12 to 15 years ago, which I was in, were kind of the ones who took Austin from provincial backwater to amazing kind of upper tier city, right? Small, but still upper tier city. And then in COVID, the summer of 2020 to about the winter of 2021 is when the horrible spiritual bypass Californians invaded, and all of us left. Like, I live in Dripping Springs, and probably a third of the people out here are Austinites who were running from those assholes.
Right.
And it's funny because all my friends, like the old school dirty hippie Austin, is like, now you know how we feel. Yeah. They were all in Dripping, now they're gone. They're in Johnson City or Blanco, or they're even further out.
Yeah.
Right? And so we had to get away from those horrible locusts. And those are the types of people who are like, not all of them, some of them are great, but the vast majority of them are that type. They just are.
I think it's an element of escapism, right? So I've done my fair share of plant medicine, and I think that you get into this mode where maybe the day of or the day after you think you're fucking healed or you've done the work. But if I'm hearing you correctly, it's got to be more than just the day of or the day after. It's got to be like that integration. And as you kind of, I hate when people say doing the work. But
I know, what does it mean?
Give me another synonym.
I can tell you exactly what it means.
What does that mean when people say do the work?
Well, hold on. I'm not telling you what other people mean. I'm telling you what it means to do the work, right? Because most people just say terms they hear other people say, and they don't have any fucking idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, because how will I know if I'm doing the work?
It's very simple. In the context of not even just psychedelics, in the context of healing, because you can do yoga and do the work, you can do meditation and do the work, you can do talk therapy, you can do saunas and do the work, right? So there's nothing special about psychedelics necessarily. It's just a very effective tool for a lot of people. Doing the work means you are feeling your emotions. That's what it means. And especially it means you're feeling emotions that are repressed, suppressed, you hide from, you run from, you kind of know are there, but you don't want to feel. That's all doing the work is. That's really all. Feeling your unfelt feelings. That's what it is.
What? Running away from it or avoiding it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, or
sitting in it.
That, in the simplest terms.
Right.
Doing the work means feeling your unfelt feelings as opposed to doing something to avoid them.
Oh, it's the opposite of avoidance. This is why I feel like men are more inclined to now, especially in the spiritual community, want to do the work, because women, I mean, I'm doing the work every 28 days. I'm just like crying and I'm super sad and then I'm really happy. I feel like I do that a lot. I'm very emotional. So does that mean I'm doing the work? Like if I'm sad about something, I really feel the sadness.
No, okay, so maybe feeling a feeling in the moment is. Yeah, you are feeling a feeling, but doing the work in the context of healing trauma means feeling emotions that you are running from, which is not the same thing. Like if you see an amazing commercial with a cute puppy and a baby, and then they get nuked and you're all sad and like, yeah, you may feel that emotion very deeply right there and cry a lot, and that's feeling an emotion.
That's healthy, yeah.
Sure, if that's what you're feeling, right? It's healthy to go ahead and let that out, right? But that's I don't want to say it's a very different thing, but it is not the same thing as if your mom always told you were fat growing up and you have all kinds of shame and grief about that. Feeling that is not the same thing as feeling an emotion from a commercial.
So I want
living experiences.
Right, do you understand? Because like if your mom shamed you, right? Yeah. I'm just making that up. If she shamed you, there's a lot of trauma from that. Yeah. All trauma, essentially, this is a very simplistic explanation, but what trauma really is unfelt feelings.
Wow.
Okay, like you were wounded or hurt in someone may not have done something wounding to you, but you experienced it as a wound, right? And so, because people think, oh, trauma is only like sexual assault or rape or physical violence. No, like that is trauma, of course, but there's all kinds of other traumas that are just as impactful, if not more impactful. So whatever happened to you that you experienced as a trauma, right? If it was an overwhelming feeling to you normally happens as a child, but it could have been 2 weeks ago, right? If it was an overwhelming feeling, what the brain does, the way to deal with that, to stop from essentially breaking, is that it stores the trauma away, whether it's in your body or a memory or whatever, and it pushes it away so that you can essentially keep going in the moment. Right? Yeah. And if you don't process that, if you don't allow that to come back up and feel it, then it's essentially stuck in you. It is a stuck emotion, okay? Yeah. And what psychedelics are very good at, not the only way at all, but a very good tool, is to open a space in you where those stuck emotions can then come up, but you got to feel them, right? Let's take a really good example. I know someone who did psychedelics, and like they didn't think that I didn't trauma this or that. They'd gotten in a car wreck as a kid. Like they actually do have amazing parents. Had gotten in a car wreck as a kid. Right, were in a car when it was it was a bad one. You know, like parents almost died, all this kind of stuff, right? And like, like I got through that. Man, the dude, like he literally relived that car wreck. It was MDMA, just MDMA, which is the best for trauma healing. It is the best medicine. And like went through what he realized is that he had not processed. He had processed it intellectually. Like he knew it all happened. He thought his way through processing. He didn't actually feel any of those emotions. And it makes sense because like when it happened, it was very young and it was a literal life or death. Like not like this wasn't a story he created in his mind as an 8-year-old or something, which can do it. I mean, this was, and so. Dude, I mean, the dude lost 20 pounds after, like, everything in his life changed. He had all this stuck emotion. Again, I mean, in the most simplistic sense. Like, I'm not, that's what doing the work is bringing up emotions that are stuck in you that you have not felt or processed. Feel it, because you got to feel, like, he was like, dude, it was the worst thing ever. You know, like, because he went through the car wreck essentially again. Yeah. Because he never actually felt the emotions. Yeah. So all of the stuff and, like, the terror of it and the crying, and it was like, I wasn't in the room with him, but he's like, bro, it was worse than the car wreck. Yeah. But for him, because he didn't feel any of it the first time, right? For sure. He experienced the incident, did not feel his body, he, like, froze it, right? Yeah. He felt it. So that's doing the work.
Like feel it.
Right.
It.
And people who spiritually bypass, what they would say in that situation is they'd push that away, but be like, oh, I felt myself come in and pull myself out of the wreck and washed all the fear away. It's like, that's fucking bullshit. Right. If you aren't feeling it, you are not processing. That's just how the body works. It's not a judgmental thing. You know, that's like saying my car runs on fairy dust. No, it doesn't. Right. It runs on gas or diesel, like everyone else's. Yeah. Right. Or if it's a Tesla, it runs on coal because coal powered the fucking electrical plant that powered your thing. Make sense?
I want to back up for a second and ask you, if you were talking to yourself 20, 25 years from now, would you believe that you're sitting here in Texas on your ranch?
You mean years ago?
Yeah,
served beer in hell days.
Yeah,
like years ago that you'd be talking about MDA therapy and trauma and all that. How did you kind of get to that spot? I was always curious. I was looking up a lot of interviews. And obviously, you've known Clay and Angie for a while. Was there one moment that was a flip for you, or was it a series of moments that was like, I got to change this shit?
It'd be a much cooler story if it was like one moment. Yeah, it's not. It was. If I had to point to one moment, so there was one moment that started, it was kind of the trigger that started a cascade, right? But it was still years until I actually started doing the work. The one moment was November 27th, 2009. That was the Saturday. So there was a movie made about my first book called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, right? Yeah. And it came out September 20, whatever it was, I think the day before, 26 or something. And the day that we got like the receipts back or started getting, and I realized that the movie wasn't going to do that well. It was totally soul crushing to me at the time. In the moment, it was like, it was not fundamentally different for me than if you told me I was going to the electric chair. Like my subjective reaction to it. I remember I was in a hotel room in Tempe, Arizona. I was at the Aloft in Tempe, Arizona. And this is back when Aloft was like new and cool. And not anymore. But I remember like the rooms and like I just remember it very clearly. And we got the receipts back and I realized the movie wasn't going to do well. And it was like, I felt like I was dying. Like I the first time I'd cried, and can't remember how long. And I felt like I was dying. Yeah. Truly. I actually like, yes, on one hand, it is the most ridiculous rich white person problem of all time, right? No, but like the movie about your life, the Hollywood major release movie about your life that's coming out is not going to be a massive hit, and you feel like you're dying. Like that's hilarious. It really is.
Now it's funny,
but it's also true. Like that's just where I was at that. That's who I was and where I was at the moment, and it was really fucking hard for me.
How old were you then?
I was 30. I was 30. It was my Jesus year. I was 34. I turned 34 that day. Yeah, dude, it was horrible. And that's what broke my grandiosity and my narcissism. Now, from there, it took another, 2 years before I actually started talk therapy, 1.5 to 2 years. Because it was like, basically, when I was younger and, I went to law school, got fired 2.5 weeks into my first legal job. And I deserved it. I got super drunk and, whatever, this and that. Then went to work for my dad in the family business, restaurants in South Florida. And he fired me, I think it was about 6 months I lasted at the family business.
On a Wednesday?
No, he fired me on I don't even remember what it was. It was bad. But so he fired me and so it was like, all right. So then I basically went through a phase where I was very poor and very broke and didn't know what I was going to do. And my buddy, a couple of my buddies from law school were like, look, man, these emails you're writing that you're sending to us are the funniest thing that I've ever read. You should do this. And I'm like, be a writer? What am I, a bitch? Like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, yeah, well, you're not good at the shit you're trained for, motherfucker. So maybe you are a bitch. Maybe you should do. And so I kind of long fits and starts and nonsense, but I eventually got that going. But I was poor and broke for a long time, and a dude, right? And so as a dude, even if you're not, no one cares about guys, right? So all my 20s, I'm like working hard, trying to do stuff and be stuff. And then you always have this thought when you're in that process, especially as a dude. All right, if I can be rich and famous or accomplished or whatever, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
If I get there, I'm good. Mm-hmm. And so then by the time the movie was out, I was way more famous than I thought I would ever need to be, and way more rich I thought I would ever need to be happy. Like I was 10x more humble, and like it was better than being poor and broke and anonymous, but it was like 10% better. Like
you thought it'd be better. You got to the finish line. You thought it'd be better.
It was the difference. Like I was eating chicken shit before, and now it's like I'd be eating caviar. It's like maybe I'm eating chicken salad, but it's still fucking. It's not that like it's only marginally better, right? And so it's like, man, like it was really shocking to me how little fame, money, attention, success helped me feel. Like it was better than not, but it was like, it's like going from like, if it's like 105 out, oh, you want to come in the shade, it's only 100 degrees. Like, okay, I guess this is better. It still sucks, right? It's the same sort of thing. And so, anyway, I had a couple cycles of that, and the movie was like the thing where it was like, oh, okay, well, when I'm this famous and this successful, then it's like, but then like I realized, what the fuck am I? That's nonsense, right? And so that didn't work. Then I fixed everything external in my life. Like I moved to Austin after the movie. Actually, it was 2009 when I moved to Austin, and it's like I got in amazing shape, finances dialed, because it wasn't my money in the movie. Like I still made plenty of money, so I got my finances dialed in, health, like everything was perfect in my life. Like it was, and I still was like, okay. Literally everything that I could want in my life is as good as it could possibly be, and I'm like maybe 15% happier now than I was when I was poor and broken. I'm like, okay, and actually I'm in a lot of ways kind of miserable. Like I'm better, 15% better than when I was poor, broken, anonymous, but I'm still just as miserable, even more miserable in certain ways, like which were very confusing to me. And then I was like, okay, well then the only thing left is me. Like the inside, there's shit inside of me, right? And obviously, this is not a super like deep, hard thing to realize, but for me at the time, it was not obvious. And so then I finally started talk therapy, and I went 4 times a week for 4 years. Like I found, but I had to go to 20 different therapists to find a good one, or one that I could, like who was, because I could bullshit most of them. I could manipulate them. I was just smarter than they were, and it just went. And I eventually had to go to the therapist that was the therapist to therapists. Like one of the women who I kind of liked, but just I'm like, who do you go to? And she's like, oh, And she realized she didn't send me right. Doing. So there's like a kind of like the therapist for like hard case therapists, right?
Yeah.
I went to her, and she was really good for me at the time because like she's an older woman, she'd seen everything, she was super smart. Like I couldn't run any game on her, right? And so it was like eventually it was like, oh, I guess I got to start facing my shit then, right? And so she did a pretty good job with that. But then it's like what talk therapy is really good at talking. Right? And so you understand, talking is a way of intellectually understanding your issues, right? And there are some people who can feel a lot in talk therapy. I was not one of those, right? And so I got a really good understanding of my emotions, of my traumas, of my issues, of why I was acting a certain way. And so I got, let's say I went from 20% understanding myself to like 70% understanding myself intellectually. But I went from like 5% feeling my emotions to like 10%, like which I doubled, but still like nothing. And so like eventually when therapy started going in circles and wasn't helping anymore, I tried a bunch of yoga, which was like nonsense. Because like to me, I'm like, this is bad meditation combined with a bad workout. Like this doesn't make any sense.
You needed something drastic.
Yeah, well, yoga works great for some people. It just didn't for me.
For you.
And then a bunch of other things to do. And then, long story short, a buddy of mine did MDMA therapy, and this is, by the time he did that was, when did 40 years, like I think last week was my 40-year anniversary, so that would have been 2018. So he did, it was like 2017, he did MDMA therapy, and I saw the change in him, and I was like, that's it, that's what I want. Like he wasn't trying to sell me on this or pitch me. And this is a dude who's like as committed as I was to like doing the work and whatever. I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know. I didn't understand. And so first time I did MDMA therapy, I mean, I wrote a long blog post about this, but the first time I did MDMA therapy was so, it was so transformative. It was just like if I had to divide my life into two halves, the place I would do it would be there. Not before wife or before kids or after kids or before fame or after rich or poor. No, it would be before MDMA and after. Because on the first time, because I had never done any drugs recreationally, ever.
Oh.
Right?
Like weed or anything?
Never.
Oh, you had just been drunk.
Drank a ton.
Okay.
Drank the rivers.
But never even high.
Never.
Wow.
No.
Okay.
It is.
Were you nervous going into it?
I bought remember DARE drug abuse? Like I bought all that propaganda as a kid.
Yeah.
No, because growing up as a kid in Kentucky, like they push that stuff hard. But the reason I bought it is because everyone I knew in my life who was a loser was also doing drugs. Like just in my life, right? And so like, okay, DARE makes sense. And even though I knew it was bullshit government propaganda, it was still a deep like, I literally didn't know anyone who had their shit together who was doing that, right? As a kid in Kentucky. So, but then as I grew up, it wasn't seeing it was really the results, right? And I saw him and I'm like, okay. And then I actually studied it. I'm like, oh, these things are illegal for total bullshit reasons. Like this is nonsense. And this is before Michael Pollan and everyone else who's like thinks they're fancy got into this. I was like, oh, this is all bullshit. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I'm gonna dive in. And yeah, dude, it was a little nerve wracking. I wasn't that worried. I just had no idea what was on the other side because I did not realize how little of myself I was connected to and how little of my own emotions I was feeling. Because, I got so annoyed with all the people who were like, oh, it helps connect you to yourself. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't connect, and what am I going to get my real cell phone number? Like, what the hell? What that means is feeling your feelings. I did not realize what a small window of the feelings that were inside of me I was feeling. And man, as soon as that medicine hit me, like not when I took it, because it takes about 45 minutes or an hour to kind of get in, but I remember it, man. I remember it so clear. I was laying there on the sofa, Anne's place in New York, and I had my eye shade on, and the music with Spanish guitar music was playing, and like all of a sudden, it was like out of nowhere, I felt the deepest, most profound love I had ever felt in my life. Like it wasn't just more love. It was like, it's
Like ecstasy? Like bliss?
No. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I get why the street name of MDMA is ecstasy. Yeah. It's not. It was love. It was like, it's sort of like one beer is a different thing than 10. It's not like linear. It's like one beer, you don't even feel it. 10 beers, you're fucking plowed or whatever, right? I had felt like one beer my whole life. And then like I had 10 all at once. And I'm like, oh, and without taking all the metaphor or the issues with drunk, it was like, I didn't realize what love was. I didn't realize how I could feel. I didn't realize I had gone, at that point I was 42. I had gone 42 years without feeling love. And I was married. I had 2 kids. I loved them with everything I had. And it was like, I had no access to the depth of the emotions. And because I had suffered so much trauma as a kid, I had no idea. I knew like I'd had some rough stuff in my childhood, but I'm like, I know tons of people who had it way worse, right? And like okay, yeah, like my mom wasn't there that much for me and my dad, blah blah blah, but like it wasn't that bad. No, it was pretty bad. And nothing new came up. Like nothing. Like it wasn't like a lot of times on MDMA, a lot of people who suffered a lot of trauma who really totally pushed it away, it can come up. None of that. It was all stuff I already knew. I had not felt any of it, right? And so, man, it was funny, man. Like the first thing I felt is for about 20 minutes, it was like, I was crying and my wife was there. I'm like, baby, I love you so much. I had no idea how much I loved you. And not intellectually, nothing changed intellectually. It was like my heart was bursting. Like I didn't understand what people meant when they said that. Like I thought, okay, it's just a goofy metaphor. No, I'm like, fuck, I feel like my heart is bursting, not breaking, but bursting. Right? I'm like, I get why people say that now, and I understood connection. I'm like, fuck, now I can, and I did get to an ecstatic state, but that's not what I was. Love, very specifically, love is what I was feeling, and then, then it was like. And then I kind of felt this deep, profound safety and secureness I never felt in my life. And it's not like I walked around anxious. I didn't think I was anxious. I didn't think I ever felt unsafe. Like I'm a dude and I know how to fight. Like, and I'm like me especially, I'm like, okay, like I'll go anywhere. I don't get like, doesn't bother me. I had no idea how unsafe, not on an intellectual, physical level, but on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And then, dude, and then hell came. Like really, truly. Like it was like okay, you got your 30 minutes of like where you're gonna get to when this is all done, but now you gotta it's time to pay the debt on all the emotions that you've pushed away for 42 years. And so for me it started physically, like called somatic release. I was shaking like you ever seen someone have a seizure? It was like a slow speed seizure, right? It was literally like this, and like my legs were like kind of like that, right? Not fast. And that's all quite literally flight. Fight tends to be in the arms, flight's in the legs, right?
How animals do that.
That's exactly right. And that's all. It's all Peter Levine's research and Bessel van der Kolk's research. Like I had read all that. I didn't really. Now I was like, oh shit. Everything they said is exactly right. Yeah. I felt it coming out. Bro, I did 4 MDMA sessions over the next, whatever it was, 6 months. It was almost nothing but somatic release, physical trauma release. And then it was like on my 5th session, finally I got to the state of where it was like started kind of going through my life, like almost like a movie, which is what a lot of people talk about. And then like going through and like processing stuff from relationships and other stuff. Like I had so much fucking trauma. And then as I went deeper and deeper and deeper, man, like I spent a year processing nothing but grief. And it was the deep, bro. There was a time, this is a couple years later, I did LSD and MDMA together. Whoa. And which is an amazing combination. I would not recommend starting with that.
In a facilitated,
of course. I don't do this shit recreationally, and I don't do it without facilitators, right? And so, but MDMA is great because it's very soft and gentle and opens you up and helps you process it. LSD is great because it rips the veneer off reality, and it forces you. It's like, oh, you think that's what's real? Nope, here it is, and puts your fucking face in it, which by itself can be very harsh. But with MDMA, it doesn't necessarily soften the LSD. It just makes it easier for you to process. And so, the first time I did that, my wife was there. with the facilitator. And she said something, I think Deacon, who's our third kid, was crying in the other room or done. And she said something to me about Deacon, like, I don't know, he cries like you or whatever. And I started laughing. And then on the emotional kind of scale, laughter is next to grief, right? If you ever see, there's amazing videos of this. You ever see it's a famous National Geographic, like a leopard takes a monkey from a troop, and the monkeys all go up in the trees, and I forget the species of monkey, but the colobus or something, they start laughing, right, as a way of processing grief.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
I could see how
I started laughing, and I knew this, but I didn't get it. I tipped over. You ever laugh so much you start crying?
all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So I tipped over into grief, and I started literally. LSD in me lasts about 12 to 14 hours. Most people, but it lasts a long time. About 10 of the next 12 hours was heaving, racking, full body sobs of grief. And then every medicine I did it didn't matter what I did for the next year, I had grief. Like, it didn't matter. I did 5-MeO, grief. I did mushrooms, grief. It didn't matter. I had so much fucking grief in me.
What was the grief from?
Childhood trauma.
Yeah, but specifically for me, most of it was the mother wound. Like, my mom, man, this is all going to sound crazy. I'll tell you what my experience was. Towards the end, it took it was almost exactly a year. And one of the last sessions I did during that year was MDMA. And I felt like I went through a progression of, like, at 18 months, I relived it. I remembered myself at 18 months and standing up in my crib, reaching like this, saying "Mama, Mama, Mama," and she wouldn't come, and feeling my heart break and sadness and all that sort of stuff. And wow. Oh, dude. And then I went further back and felt like in the womb. It was like a memory from the womb, which is I thought was crazy, but it actually happens all the time especially on MDMA, but other stuff too. And I didn't really, it was literally in the womb, and I felt my mom's grief, her sadness, she wanted me but didn't want me, and knew if my dad wanted her to have an abortion, which is not I didn't discover this on me. I knew this already. Intellectually, I knew this. But I felt her emotions about that, and her all of her stuff about that, and her grief and all of that. And it was I shouldn't say I felt hers. I felt her, I don't know how to describe this. I almost felt like she was dumping it onto me. Maybe not on purpose. There wasn't intent or not intent. It was just I don't know, you ever see your parents have a certain emotion and then you start feeling that emotion? It was very much, that's what it felt like to me. And anyway, so that I think almost all of my grief was essentially rejection by the mother. And it wasn't full rejection. It's not like my mom raised me to a certain age, and I feel like she loved me as much as she could. She was just a very troubled, broken, sad person who never dealt with any of her shit. So it's you can't give someone more than you have, right? So it's my mom had, 50 cents of love, and she gave me 50 cents, right? But if a kid needs $500 of love, I got 50 cents, right? And that the grief of that I had because it's, especially for a kid, that's overwhelming. That's so overwhelming. You feel. I felt like I was going to die as a 5-year-old man, feeling that. I can remember, asking Veronica to help me and save me, not literally, but I felt like I was fucking dying. And, one of the big lessons I've learned on how to do this is the title of my first guide's book, Trust, Surrender, Receive. So, every time I get in a place I feel like I can't handle it or I can't deal with it, whether it's on psychedelics or not, I've gotten to the point now where I really don't need to do much medicine to get into states like this and to kind of deal with my emotions. It helps to go really deep, but I don't need to do it anywhere near as much as I used to. And I surrendered. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to die, then I die. I basically, and then it was gone. Not all of it. The next wave of grief came after that, right? But then I really started learning how to surrender, which surrender doesn't mean in the context of psychedelics, and especially healing trauma with psychedelics as a tool, what it really means is surrender to whatever your body's trying to heal itself, right? It's trying to bring this stuff up so you can feel it and then let it go. But the key is you got to feel it first. You don't just get to let it go, right? And so I just surrendered to whatever emotions came up. And God, man, so much grief came. It was just, it felt like it would come up, I would feel it. I was, like grief, like, and then it would, boom, it'd be gone. It's actually the way it works. Emotions really can't last 60 to 90 seconds, right? Mm. And so, and a lot of it was not even tied to a specific memory, right? Like a lot of it was just grief. And so that was really, really difficult. But like once I kind of got through that phase, it was like, oh God, like I had no idea. Happy is the wrong word. I had no idea how calm and serene and content I could feel on a day-to-day basis. It's like I had no idea how anxious and agitated and fucked up, and I mean this without judgment, I was before, and I didn't realize what the other states were like. And so like once I'm not, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm enlightened. No. I think I've just gotten through the bulk of the trauma I experienced. At least, you know what I felt as I've gone deeper, it's not new stuff. It's just deeper layers of the same stuff. And I think I've gotten to the bottom of a lot of my core stuff, core life trauma, right? So like stuff that happened to me. So the mother wound, like some people don't have that. Some people had amazing mothers. So my kids don't have that. My wife's a fucking insanely good mom. Like she is there with them all the time. They're going to have other traumas. Maybe might have a father wound. They're not going to have a mom wound. And so like not everyone has that. I did. It was a big one for me. And it was a big thing I had to face and deal with. And I think I've gotten through most of that, if not all of it, but definitely I'm past 50% at a minimum, I think. And so like, now I'm at the point now where I can kind of, I'm not great at it, but I've learned to start to feel my emotions. That's what connection to self is. Now I get what, all of this is an experience, and trauma disconnects you from yourself. You can't have that experience. Psychedelics or other modalities. Like for some people, I honestly know people who do yoga and this works for them. This is it. But there's tons of modalities that connect you to yourself so you can feel your emotions. You can have that's the experience of life. That's what it is.
Hey guys, it's Mike here. As many of you know, sleep is one of the most overlooked yet important factors in our health and recovery. If you've been dealing with difficulty falling asleep and waking up tired and groggy after binging Game of Thrones or Love is Blind all night because you can't sleep, I've got you. We developed an incredibly tasty sleepy gummy line that has some amazing all-natural powerhouse ingredients in it. Now, some of the ingredients in the gummy are organically grown CBD and CBN. CBN, known as cannabinol, is a compound extracted from hemp that's non-psychoactive. Don't worry, Mom, it won't get you high. But it contains powerful, relaxing properties known to improve the quality of REM sleep, and we all need more of that. We've also got myrcene in there. It's a natural compound found in plants that promotes a calming, sedative effect to help you fall asleep faster. And we've also got melatonin, another natural occurring hormone that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, helps you fall asleep faster, and stay asleep longer. So these are just a few of the ingredients packed in this gummy, but trust me, this is our best-selling product for a reason, guys. I can't tell you how many people come up to me or DM me telling me about how Sleepy changed their life. You've got to try this out. And exclusive to the Best Medicine Podcast listeners, we're offering a 20% off code on Sleepy Gummies and all Soul CBD products. Just use the code TBM and make sure to let us know what you think. We've got over 6,000 5-star reviews now, and I'm proud of the quality and efficacy of our products. So go use code TBM at mysoulcbd.com and enjoy. So the cynic would say, okay, yeah, you felt all that. And by the way, I'm not one of these people. I've done a lot of plant medicine. I've had out-of-body, out-of-world experiences that I see so many similarities as you talk about this, because it's tough to even articulate what that feeling is.
Because it's an experience.
It's an experience. Yeah. But the cynic would say, okay, well, you're on drugs. Of course, you're going to feel that. But there's been and right now, you're not on drugs that I know of.
No.
But so
we're all on MDMA right
that
now.
I know of. I don't know what's in that one.
I love all of you.
What's cool, it sounds like, is because of those experiences now, there's a fundamental change in you as a human being. It's not acute. It's
your cells change.
Oh yeah, no, everything. Everything about
your brain chemistry changes
completely
forever.
Right.
Yes, totally.
What if people are afraid of that? They say, "Oh, well, what if it hurts your brain?" What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, is there a negative side?
Then be afraid.
Yeah.
If you're not ready, you're not ready. Cool.
Right.
Okay. I know you were for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only done one experience.
Yeah,
it was very light.
You're very anxious.
Just got back from Jamaica a few months ago, and he did. You can.
Yeah, I
tell him
did.
what
So
happened.
it was pretty cool. They're doing some clinical trials through this organization, and they had a bunch of professional athletes. I was a fighter for 10 years. I retired a couple of years ago. So they had some hockey players, fighters, NFL guys, all of us who have had, brain injuries and dealt with depression and mood swings because of it, which I have. And we were doing psilocybin. Right. And it was ESPN E60 was there filming, which was cool. But when you're in it, I didn't even realize cameras were there. And, but it was really cool because they did brain scans kind of before and after. And I went through, I did one of 4 grams, then another one of 6 grams. Similar. Serious doses, man. And you're in the middle of the jungle in Jamaica. I went through some experiences that I can't explain on a podcast or in an interview. It's difficult, but incredibly healing. But also, I dealt with a lot of grief, a lot of trauma too, and a lot of things with my mom as well. Interesting. And one of the things is I felt her pain as well. Our parents went through a really ugly divorce, and that definitely affected me. And for the first time, so when you were saying that, it really resonated with me because as someone who kind of went through that of feeling her pain, it really helped me not only just like forgive her, forgive my dad, but it gave me so much more empathy for them. And I think what's really cool about that is now and once again, I'm not enlightened. I've got a bunch of fucking work to do. You are.
I'm a shaman.
But I don't have kids yet, but I do believe that this shit is passed down
100%.
with generations.
Absolutely.
And now we're in a position to break that cycle. So I'm curious with you coming out of that now, and you have 4 kids, right?
Yes.
How have you thought of yourself differently as a father? How different are you as a father? How's that affected you?
I've said this before, and I think it's true. If it wasn't for psychedelic therapy, really specifically MDMA, although I've had great experiences on almost all of them. But if it wasn't for psychedelic therapy, I would almost certainly not be married anymore. And I would be a terrible father. There's no doubt, really. How can you show up for your kids and love them and connect with them and care for them if you don't do that for yourself? You can't, And I don't know. I can give you 100 examples of ways that it's not that the medicine didn't make me a better father. That's nonsense. I used medicine as a tool to help me deal with my stuff. And that made me a better father, right? It's like psychedelics are like a tool. Like you want to build a house, you don't need psychedelics. You need a hammer and a screwdriver and whatever, right? So you want to connect with your kids. You want to love your kids. You want to be a present, emotionally connected parent. You got to do all that stuff. You got to do your own work, right? And psychedelics are a tool, not the only tool. But for me, they've been not even the best tool. They've been one of my primary tools that I've used, but they're not like I'm taking MDMA and parenting, it's like they're not, it's 100% just about dealing with my stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not a hallucinogen. For the
MDMA
people,
is not, no.
So for the people listening who are curious about what it is, the Austin term would be it's a heart opener, right? What is roughly the science of what it's doing?
So it actually there's
I'm
there's
extremely coherent while it's happening.
Yeah, it's an entheogen, right? So essentially, look, MDMA is methyl dioxymethamphetamine, And what it essentially does, simplistic, like there's entire books about it. If you really want to dive into the science of it, there's great stuff out there you can find for free or on Amazon. But basically what it does is that it triggers your brain. It doesn't actually even, I don't believe it crosses the blood-brain barrier. I could be wrong. I don't think it does. But what it does, it triggers your brain to essentially dump all of its serotonin all at once.
Sounds amazing.
Right. And so what you feel, serotonin is the chemical that controls essentially love and safety. And so, again, very simplistically. And so you feel the deepest love you've ever felt, or very deep love, and you feel a very deep safety. So what that is a trigger to your brain and your body to then, when you're feeling loved and safe, you can now go back and deal with stuff that was unsafe. In the past.
You can revisit it.
That's why.
With like a safety jacket on.
Yes.
Like it's like you're jumping in the water again, but with a
right. It's learning how to
buoy.
it's right. Swimming with a life jacket on. Right. And so like that's essentially how it works. Now there's a lot of other you can just take it and see what happens. That works for some people. For me, having the right guides and having the right instructions going, not too many instructions, but the right instructions going in were really important because a lot of stuff can come up and it's very, very confusing and challenging until you understand how to navigate the space and you can have an idea of what's going on. And so the best instructions I got were from my guide who wrote a book called Trust, Surrender, Receive. And the title of the book are the instructions. Trust the medicine, surrender to it, receive what comes up, right? And then there's another book called A Dose of Hope, where Dr. Dan Engel, who's a researcher and been in this space, been doing this for years, he wrote a book that kind of it's like a parable, walks people through. Here's what the sessions look like. Here's instructions, like kind of a deep dive of sort of how to do it and what it looks like that experience. So if you want I would just read those books and go in. But simplistically, all it does is it helps you get to an emotional space that is very difficult to get to on your own, especially if you're traumatized, right? So let me explain. This is important. A lot of people don't understand. When you take you can take psychedelics for two totally different reasons. We've been talking about healing trauma. In the 60s, and the popular conception of psychedelics is essentially mind expansion, right? And you can absolutely get a lot of mind expansion, right? Whether it's like having unexplainable experiences or talking to space aliens or going to other places or talking to dead relatives or seeing things or experiencing other people, whatever. Like that all can and does happen. I've gotten a lot of mind expansion on psychedelics, but I have never gone into psychedelics with the intention of mind expansion. There's not right or wrong. It's just the way what my guides and my mentors explained it to me is mind expansion will always be there. But if you go in looking for mind expansion before you've dealt with your trauma, the best thing that can happen is that you're going to be very confused and you'll spiritually bypass. The best thing. The worst thing is the trauma comes when you're not ready for it. That's what a bad trip is. Someone takes LSD and goes to a concert and it's like, the memory of getting raped at 18 in college comes up and they weren't ready for that or expecting it, and it's right in their fucking face, and they freak out and have a breakdown, which I would too if I had some crazy memory of something I didn't want to think about or feel, came back kind of like when I wasn't ready or willing to face that, right? That's all a bad trip is. There's almost nothing else to it, right? So a lot of people think about psychedelics in terms of mind expansion, and that's not a wrong way to think about it. It's just different. And I always tell people, you can go in for mind expansion, but if you have unresolved issues, they're probably going to come up.
I mean, we all have issues, right? We're humans. There's nobody who doesn't have some sort of trauma.
Right.
There's no human walking around who doesn't have trauma, right? So I need to do this.
Life is suffering. Buddha understood this, 3,000 years ago. Like, this is not news. So the question is not, has trauma happened to you? The question is, have you dealt with your emotions around it? Have you processed it? If you have, I definitely know people. Let's just take a Byron Katie, right? Like someone like that. I don't know her that well, but let's just assume she's dealt with all of her trauma. And it doesn't mean that stuff never happened to her, right? It doesn't mean she can't have emotions surrounding it. It means that she has dealt with this stuff from the past. And if new triggers or things come up, she has a way to deal with those in the moment, and she doesn't have to push them down, right?
Right.
Okay. So that's really the goal of all of this is essentially of healing trauma is to deal with this stuff from your past and then learn the skills to deal with it, because new things are going to come up. You know, like that's just, you're right.
Ending.
Like there's no way to avoid all trauma, but you can definitely have the skills to deal with trauma as it comes in and not have it, or to deal with traumatic events as they come in and the emotions that they trigger in the moment, as opposed to having to bury them or push them away and then either deal with them later or not deal with them, and then they end up running you.
I think, like, especially an example is our parents' divorce. That's something that was really difficult on both of us, but I think for different times we handled it logically. Like, I logically remember all of it. I processed all of it, and I can logically tell you I'm fine, I'm over it, I don't care. It is what it is.
Yeah. But none of that was true.
But subconsciously, if I go into MDMA, what could come up? We don't know. What could come up is that I could actually bring up a lot of sadness or insert in whatever emotion around it.
If you're saying that, that means it's absolutely.
Well, I just assume. I have to assume that somewhere in there. I mean,
look,
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
The example is like you go in and think, I'm fine. I know what happened. I'm fine. I don't care about it. But just because up here I think I'm fine doesn't mean that
exactly what happened to me.
Doesn't mean that it's not stored somewhere in my body where it's like really pissed or sad or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I don't know, right? But truly, I don't. Like, I don't even know you well enough to know that part of your life. But there's a high likelihood that that's the case. That's exactly what happened to me.
So you can go in with that open mind and curiosity and say, I don't think I have something I specifically want to work on, but let's go. Let's see what's there. You can do that?
That's the definition of trusting the medicine, surrendering to it, and then receiving what comes up. I've definitely had sessions where I thought, I got to work on this issue, and not one fucking thing came from that. It was a whole different set of things, right?
Yeah.
That happens all the time. Or there are times where it's like, oh man, I got this big issue, and I realized, it was a thing, but it was pretty easy actually to process, and then there was this whole other flood. In my experience, and most of the people that I've helped through this, or I've talked to through this, the stuff that you aren't expecting tends to be the hardest. Or if it's like levels or layers around things, like for me, I knew my mom was not a very good mom in a lot of ways for me and did not meet a lot of my needs. I had no fucking idea that I was going to get to a point where I thought I was dying of grief.
Wow.
Yeah.
So understanding intellectually something and feeling the emotions around it they're as different as, they're so fundamentally different. They're just totally different things.
What if when people say your body will only give you what you're ready for? So what if I go in and that's the intention is to heal that, but all I feel is bliss. And I'm like, damn it, I didn't get to do that work.
Yeah, that probably means
I avoided it.
Probably.
Oh, your brain can override it, the medicine to a certain sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
So your defenses are as smart as you are, right? And so if you I have absolutely seen people do that. I've seen it. Like friends or people I know will want me to sit in with them when they're with a guy, but and so like I think of one dude I know who I dealt with a lot of trauma, and a lot pretty classical trauma, like the worst poverty and physical abuse and sexual abuse, and he is funny. He wasn't lying to himself going in. He's like, I'm gonna do MDMA. Like, I know I got some stuff to deal with, and like, literally wouldn't allow himself to face or deal with it the first time he did the medicine. Because here's the thing so there's no such thing as psychedelics. Each medicine is very, very different. They have very different impacts, very different effects, and you use them for different things. If your goal or intention is to deal with trauma, the best medicine by far is MDMA. By far, not even close. There's not even a second place if that is your primary goal. Now, you can address trauma with other things, but none of them are even in the universe of MDMA. And the what's great about MDMA is it's so gentle. right? So like you said, like it's not really a hallucinogen. Some people will sometimes have some visualizations, but you're going to pretty much be in your right mind. You're going to know what time it is. You're going to know your name. You're going to be present in your body. And to some extent, you can modulate the effects, right? So like generally speaking, you put on an eye shade, you kind of lay down on like a sofa or a bed. And the reason you put on the eye shade is because 70% of your brain or some huge percentage of your brain is visual cortex. So you cut that off, it forces you inside, right? And so you take a 5-6 hour meeting with yourself. If you take your eye shade off and sit up and start doing something else, distracting yourself, you can modulate. You can take the impact from a 10 down to a 2. Yeah, in my experience.
Oh, you can kind of like break the.
Oh, absolutely. I have absolutely been. I had an MDMA session one time. I'll never fucking forget.
How many times have you done it now? Like 20, 30?
No, maybe 15.
Oh, okay.
MDMA. And so I'll never forget this. So I was still new. I think this was like my 5th, 6th, 7th session, and which was still within the first year for me, which is very, very aggressive. Like that is not like a thing I would recommend for most people unless you have really good mentors who really understand how to modulate the medicine and the other stuff to take and all that kind of stuff. And I did. I've got like some of the best in the world. And so I got through all my somatic. I mean, I talk about like first 5 or 6 sessions of that, or first 4 or 5 sessions. And then everything went white, like kind of blank. And I was like, oh, cool. Like I've dealt with all my trauma. I did at the time. I thought, I'm like, oh, great. Like I dealt with it. Like I've gotten to the point where it's like, I honestly, the ego-y part of me was like, man, I got to enlighten them quick, which bless my heart. Right. And then it was like, I kind of was hanging out. Now I've come to learn that for me, a kind of a blank white emptiness is like, that's a hard wall defense in me. That's basically my body or my brain saying, you're not going any further. You're not ready. Yeah. And so I was kind of chilling, hanging out there. There's nothing weirder than being on psychedelics, but not having any sort of psychedelic or altered state experience. It's the weirdest thing. Because it's like you can feel it in your body and things are altered, but nothing's different. And so it's like, it's like, you ever, like, the best comparison, you ever drink a lot, but you're sitting there and you kind of don't feel, you're not going to feel it till you get up, but if you get up, you're going to feel it. Yeah. It's kind of like that, right? Okay. But way more. And so I was literally just chilling there in this weird space. And the only the metaphor I can give is like, you ever seen those shark videos where like the diver's in the water or they have the little trailing thing and the camera's looking down, you don't see anything, and nothing, and then all of a sudden, like out of blue, the shark comes flying up and you get the camera like out of nowhere, and the mouth opens and it closes on it, it flips out of the water. That's what it felt like. It felt like out of nowhere, the most intense shit I've ever felt in my life came, out of nowhere. It felt like, it wasn't the visualization I had, it's just the compare. It felt like I was a seal swimming along and the great white came out of nowhere to get me. And I sat up and I ripped that fucking thing off and I was like, oh, no. Like literally, I was like, now, years later, I'm pretty sure that was the grief coming.
What did the facilitators do when you did that? Did they say, okay?
They just, of
they
course.
honor where you're at and say,
of course,
you don't have to go back in?
Absolutely.
Oh, it's not about...
No.
There's no forcing,
This is not a place where you have like the no pain, no gain. You do that shit in CrossFit, right? You don't do that shit with psychedelics. Like, it is rare. It does happen, but it's very rare for someone to have a psychotic break on this medicine. The way you do it is pushing yourself into those places you're not ready for.
What do you mean by psychotic break?
I mean like an actual psychotic break.
Joe Rogan's talked about this on his show. A few people who, I think it was mushrooms though. They were talking about a few guys, like 25 to 28, the male brain is like still developing, obviously, and that's when they see skits in a lot of men or something.
Yeah.
From too much
has that
marijuana.
Ever happened with MDMA?
Oh, they were talking about marijuana, sorry. But MDMA, I don't know.
I think there are a few cases. She's just mainly mushrooms.
Interesting.
Or marijuana.
Where what they turn to schizophrenia, or there's a huge negative mental.
Right. That's essentially what a psychotic break. So I'm not the person. I'm not the expert on this.
Right.
I feel like it'd have to run in your family too.
And there's a genetic component. But I'm going to tell you what I believe.
Okay.
And there are definitely some researchers and experts who agree with me. They're in the minority. Okay, so what I'm about to tell you is not the accepted view, but in my experience, the people who really know this space, like, yeah, that's probably the truth, although we're not sure. I'm not sure schizophrenia actually even exists, right? I'm not sure all these mental diseases, I'm not sure any of them actually exist. It appears to me that all of these are just adaptations to overwhelming trauma.
Yep.
And that a psychotic break is essentially like a bad trip. A bad trip is when an emotion or a feeling or experience comes that you are not on these medicines that you are not ready for, and you did not intend to happen and have no context with which to process it. Then your mind is a psychotic. I don't want to explain this way a conventional therapist would, psychologist, because I don't agree with it. But what they would say is essentially you go into schizophrenia, all that kind of stuff. I think it's just your mind cleaving off that trauma and hiding it, right?
Yeah,
so doing it to a little bit at a time, you can still stay conventionally functional, but there comes a point where there's so much that it's difficult for a human organism to stay conventionally functional. And so like a psychotic break is essentially that point where it's past the conventional functionality point. It's different for each person. You know, like I obviously can deal with a whole lot of fucking trauma and still stay very functional. Some people can deal with insane amounts, others not, right? And it's not a bad or good. It's just a threshold level. And so that's what I think's going on. But again, that's a minority view and not a mainstream view.
Yeah.
Right. So don't take that as gospel as any sort of thing. Like I don't treat psychotic break people. There's a bunch of smart, reputable people who disagree with me on that. Fine. No problem. Right.
So what do you say to someone who wants to dive into this? Like, I know obviously it's illegal. I don't know where we're at with that. I know they're helping veterans with PTSD, and so some government studies going on. But
so the first question I would ask,
safe.
The first question I would ask someone is, why do you want to do this?
To heal trauma.
Okay. So the first thing I always do is I tell people to read A Dose of Hope, right? Because it's a parable. It's like kind of a regular dude who goes through 3 MDMA sessions, and it does a really good job sort of walking someone through what it's actually like to think about it ahead of time, to make the decision, to do the sessions, to process your emotions, talk to your therapist, how it impacts you, your family, all that. I'm like, go read that. Then if you still want to do it, come back and talk to me. And so I actually, because I was one of the first sort of well-known public people to talk about this publicly. Right? You know, like I wrote my piece 4 years ago. Not the first, but I was one of the very first. And so I had, at this point, probably 1,000+ people come to me and ask me for referrals, because a lot of people want to do this. Yeah. Because you said it's illegal. It's very hard. It's much easier now than it was 4 years ago to find a legal place to do it, but there are very, very few places, right? And so I found there's not a lot, but there's a good number of underground guides. And I found 2 that are willing to take blind referrals, meaning like, you know, like if you or Angie want a referral, like I know a ton of amazing guides, right? And so I could give you referrals to the best guys in the country. But like, most of them are like, don't send me someone unless you know them. Because for sure. For obvious like reasons, right? Yeah. And so, but I found 2 who are willing to take sort of like, if someone emails you, just give them my contact info and I'll use my intuition and see. And like, I'm like, okay, cool, great. Like, and they know full well, like, I don't know these people. They might be cops. They could be crazy people. I don't know. I don't know anything about them. And they're both like, yeah, I get it. It's cool. And so if any of your listeners want to email me, tuckermax@gmail.com. I'm happy to refer them to one of those people. But generally speaking, read Dose of Hope. If you want to email me, you can. There's other legal ways. I wrote a whole beginner's guide to psychedelics, which, you know, like you can go to Jamaica to do psilocybin. There's a bunch of places you can do now ayahuasca or MDMA in kind of psychedelic churches in America. There used to be only very few number. Now there's a ton. And so if you look around for psychedelic churches in your area, you might be able to find some. Yeah. Now, some of those, man, are run by fucking clowns. Like, be real clear about this. You are doing this under the best of conditions is still very challenging. You are opening up your soul to feel the deepest things you've run from your whole life. So, like, I would really get to know the person that you're going to have facilitate for you, and make sure you trust them. Like the two people that I refer, both of them have sat for me, and I've sent tons of. I know they're great, and all the other guys that I know, but like. I'm not, like I know 3 or 4 people pouring ayahuasca in Austin who I wouldn't send an enemy to. I think they're irresponsible. I don't think they know what they're doing. There are a lot of guys who are holding themselves out as shamans right now who are dangerous.
Well, it's like anything in life, right? I mean, even to a lesser degree, the business we're in of CBD, like it's not quite FDA regulated. So you've got people that are sourcing absolute shit from China, and there's pesticides in it. And then you've got, reputable companies that are doing all. So I totally hear you on that. Where do you think that there's, and I don't know if you have your finger on the pulse with this, but what do you see like a legal option looking like in this country, and when?
Supposedly,
so messed up, it's illegal. It's so sad.
Supposedly 2023, it's supposed to be FDA approved for some limited legal use. Man, I don't honestly care. Like, I'll tell you why. I don't believe my sovereignty is subject to some fucking bureaucrat. Fuck them.
Sure.
If it's legal, help more people, great, cool. I'm not waiting for permission from some fucking clown who doesn't own me. I don't subscribe to the view they get to tell me what to do with my own body. No, that's not how it works.
I'm with you. You have politicians. I mean, oh my God, we need politicians of all sides to go through this. Can you imagine how much little bullshit we'd have if that was a prerequisite?
They have to take MDMA before they go into office.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, sort of. Here's the key with this stuff. You
don't want
man.
Biden to take some MDMA.
No, you know what's funny is like
he's already dead.
A lot of people tell me like, oh, can I, I need to put this jokingly. I need to put this in my husband's coffee, or like, how do I get my wife to do this?
Sure.
No, absolutely.
You have to be called to it.
The absolute most important aspect of this is choosing to do it. Like the individual doing it must understand going in at least basically what there's no way to describe this ahead of time exactly what it is. I mean, you guys know, like there's no set of words anyone could have put together because it's an experience, right? Okay, but understand, but the metaphor I use for that is like sex, right? You can watch porn and people can describe it all day, but until you fuck, you don't actually know what it's like. Psychedelics are not fundamentally different. It's just way more different than the reality, right? Like it's very okay, but at least getting an idea. Okay, this is going to be challenging. I'm going to feel these emotions. Like you understand, and then go in with the intention. Like I actually want to face my stuff, and I actually want to heal. Most people don't. Yeah. Like that's the weirdest thing. I've always my whole life wanted to get better and improve and do this. Most people, I feel like I should have known this a long time before I did, but the reality is most people don't. Most people don't want to. It's not even don't want to do psychedelics. They don't want to face any of their shit with any modality. They don't want to deal with any of their stuff, right? And so, like, people in politics are in politics because they want power over other people. That is the definition of running from their own shit. Yeah. The definition of it.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I don't give a shit about them. Like, they're not. They'll follow. Politicians will always follow. Sure. Right? People like us and the real pioneers in this space, like Stamets and Stan Groff and all those people, because I was not a pioneer in this space. I came to it relatively late compared to them, just early compared to most people, right? And so, like, those are the people that that I care about, and myself, my family, community. Yeah, I'm a huge believer of this, but I don't think I've ever said you should do this to anyone. Like I talk about my experience openly, totally. And then if people ask questions about it, I'm happy to kind of talk about it. But the thing I always tell people is that if you decide to walk this path, things are going to get harder before they get easier. Almost always with everyone. Because a lot of people, and I did too, have this idea that okay, I'm going to take this pill and then some stuff will happen and then everything's going to be great. That's kind of true, except and then some stuff will happen is really, really hard. That's the thing you really need to understand and expect going in. And if you're not a little bit afraid, you're not probably doing it right. Like you're coming in a reckless way, right? Because if you're not a little bit afraid, it means your expectations are off. Now, I definitely know people who were like terrified going in, decided to do it anyway, and it was much less challenging than they thought that would be. Okay, cool, great. Yeah. No problem with that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just want people to understand, like, this is not a magic pill, right? Like MDMA especially, because psychedelics are much trippier and weirder. It's actually easier to avoid your stuff, though. Like, I know so many people who've done ayahuasca like 50 times, and they're still they're just as fucked up as before.
Have you done ayahuasca?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They're just as fucked up as before they did ayahuasca, except now they wear a stupid fucking hat and ridiculous clothes, and they tell everyone how enlightened they are. Yeah. That's the only thing different.
And their Instagram bio
but they're
says
still
helping people get to the 5D.
Right.
What the fuck is the 5D?
But they're still narcissistic shitbirds who have disastrous lives, right?
Is MDMA, the experience of that versus ayahuasca, so different?
But do you think it
is very different.
Do you think these would be different people if they tried MDMA? Is that statement okay?
No, it's not about I can't say this enough. It's not about the medicine. It's about the person.
Yes.
Right? So like I know people who've done ayahuasca and really had insanely incredible experience. Like I would not recommend starting with ayahuasca. That is a deep end of the ocean medicine. It is really rough and intense. It can be beautiful and amazing too, but that is not the starting place. The starting place for almost everyone is either, for 80% of people, I think MDMA is the best place to start by far. There might be a few people for whom psilocybin is a better place to start. Right? And you can make those arguments.
It's intense, though.
It's very intense. The group of people for whom psilocybin is sometimes a better place to start are TBI people. Because psilocybin is so good at resetting the default mode network and essentially fixing their brain, right? That I can see a good argument for TBI people starting with psilocybin sometimes, right? But there's a few other types of people who are very stuck in depressive, loopy states. Actually, maybe ketamine sometimes it can, because ketamine's even better at breaking those. But for almost everyone, MDMA is the best if you're going in with the intention to heal trauma, right? If you just want to do drugs and go to outer space, different stuff, right? But like MDMA for almost everyone, because MDMA is an insanely safe compound. Like most psychedelics are very safe. MDMA is so safe, I don't think there's a known LD50. Meaning like the dose at which 50% of the population dies, right? Like every over-the-counter drug has an LD50. MDMA is so high, I don't think it's been... There has to be one. I don't think it's been found, right? Because it's so physically safe.
Yeah.
And it's also very, very emotionally safe too. Like it quite literally triggers the safety compound in your brain, right? The safety... serotonin. And so like and you can modulate it, right? Like to some extent. You can, if what's coming up is too intense, you can turn it down a lot. If you know as well as I do, you take 6 grams of mushrooms, you're fucking in. And there's no coming out of that until you're done.
I've only microdosed, so.
Which can be scary. I've had bad trips before on mushrooms, which always makes me hesitant. And that's why I think I've gravitated more towards trying MDMA, which I haven't. I've only tried Sassafras. Yeah. Are you familiar with Sassafras?
That's how a lot of MDMA is made, is processed. It's made from Sassafras.
Feels similar?
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So do you think about that at all, at least in terms of like MDMA is synthetic, created in a lab, versus Sassafras is organic, and we should be taking it? That doesn't matter to you.
It's almost better that it's regulated.
Because the mechanism's the same, so you're fine.
It's not exactly come from the earth. So to be technical, it's not exactly the same. The mechanism, it's close. No, I don't think it really matters. Now look, okay. If you want to make an argument that like 5-MeO-DMT, you can harvest that from a
toad.
Yeah, Sonoran desert toads, right?
Yeah.
You can have synthesize 5-MeO. Mm-hmm. There's a good argument that like you want to take synthetic because like it's very stressful on a toad and there's a lot of other. Okay, like I can buy that. Like I get that. Same with combo. There's a couple of others, right? I don't think it makes a huge difference with MDMA. I'll be honest, I have not done like Sassafras in that way, so I haven't experienced it. But molecularly, the way MDMA, the specific molecule of MDMA, and MDA, which is not exactly MDMA, but it's very molecularly similar. Those two, and there's a couple of others I think that some of the new public companies are trying to patent compounds on, but those two act in nearly identical ways on the brain. MDMA is a little bit better at accessing trauma, but MDA also works very well. They work in a way that is very, very different than any other compounds, right? And so, like, without having tried Sassafras, I know those medicines, and I know they work really well. It is a concern, like, okay, that's why I tell people, like, don't just, you can go buy, MDMA from your local drug dealer, I guess, but, like, unless your drug dealer knows his source and is testing it, most of the stuff you get at clubs is cut.
For sure.
Right, yeah. So yeah, exactly. So the guys I know usually buy in bulk, trusted sources, and then actually there's labs you can send this stuff off to get tested legally. Like you can, and so they'll send it off to a lab. One guy, one time I brought like a tabletop test. They're like, yeah, cool, of course. I mean, I know my stuff, so please go ahead, right? Because you do want pure source. Like you need 95 to 98%, I think, the MDMA. You want it as pure as possible. Okay. So definitely you don't want your medicine cut with other shit, right? But that being said, I don't know how much now synthetic psilocybin versus not. I can understand that that's a different thing, right? But MDMA, I don't think it matters, honestly.
Now, I remember reading in Dose of Hope, one of the things that you shouldn't do or you're not a good candidate for MDMA is if you're on SRIs.
SSRIs, totally.
SSRIs.
No. Yes, no.
Right.
Because SSRIs work in the opposite way of MDMA. SSRIs essentially push down serotonin response. MDMA pushes it up.
What would happen if...
So in a worst case scenario, you can die.
Wow. That's
very, very, very rare. I think there's only a couple of recorded cases of that. You get what's called serotonin syndrome. You die. What happens almost every single other time is, so I've never seen it, but some of the guides I know have, where like they ask people, but then sometimes someone will either lie or they'll forget or whatever. Basically, he said it was watching someone in just an immense amount of pain for 5 hours because they had two drugs and then battling, right? So like the best case scenario is it's a lot of discomfort.
Yeah.
Which is going to happen like 99.99% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Now it can get worse, but like if you're on SSRIs, just taper off. It's
right.
Or you can also. Some people say you can't really take psilocybin on them. I think you probably can. There's debate about that. But honestly, I would get off SSRIs. Those are disastrous compounds. They are horrific. Especially if you're trying to actually heal.
Yeah.
The point is to feel emotions. The point of SSRIs is to tamp down emotions.
Right.
That is what they do.
Right.
Right? That's not like an arguable thing. That's just what. And then aside from the fact that all the data shows, especially the last 5 years, you look at the data on SSRIs, like I think there's massive class action lawsuits coming against all the pharma companies. And I think that I hope they go through and I hope they win. Awesome. Like Vioxx level, like multi-billion dollar class action lawsuits. Those things are criminally horrible to people. That's just
causing more depression in people and issues.
The best case scenario is that SSRIs are slightly less effective than just lifting weights. Yeah. The best case scenario, but there's a lot of data that they are and in my experience, I didn't take them, but I've seen a lot of people who have.
Yeah.
And I think that they are
long term, especially.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Follow the money.
Yeah. Do you think that you will tell your kids about MDMA?
Oh, of course.
Do they? I mean,
Vaughn and
on
the internet.
Bishop are too young now, but when do you think will be the age where you're like, hey, there's this thing, and one day maybe you'll do it too to heal trauma and
whenever it comes up. I mean, like it's not like I didn't put it on the calendar. Like, oh, in 2030, I'm gonna.
Hey guys, there's this thing I've been doing.
It's like teaching the birds and the bees, and then about MDMA.
I wish our dad did some MDMA and also would have done it because that would have been cool to hear his experience because Lord knows he may need it.
Hopefully he's not listening.
We all need it. Hopefully he's not listening.
Yeah.
What do you think of microdosing for psilocybin? Because I did a whole 90 days of it and I enjoyed it. I mean, I felt a little bit more creative. I laughed at some trees a little bit more. I mean, I was taking 0.15, 0.2. I don't know what it did, to be honest. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I feel like it transformed my life. I like the feeling. Yeah. You just feel a little warm. You feel a little bit more fuzzy that day. And I'm already a generally very happy person. So I don't know if it was necessary, but I don't know. I know a lot of people are really wanting to get into microdosing psilocybin right now.
Yeah, but this may be a shitty analogy, but it's like if you want to get in proper shape, let's say you're ready to run a marathon, are you going to just walk a block every day, or
well, if you're really fat, yeah, you got to start somewhere.
No,
True,
but actually, no.
Is that a bad analogy?
Like, say.
Are you calling me fat? No.
Well, you gotta dive in and you gotta deal with the pain. And you gotta run.
So yeah, like was it pointless? Is basically you're saying it's just too little.
I'm not saying it's pointless.
Do you remember? It might have been 10 minutes ago when I said that this is not a space for no pain, no gain mentality.
Remember,
no,
Mike?
I have TBI. Remember?
I
forgot.
Remember, Mike?
I forgot this entire conversation.
You said I can go slow.
But no, honestly, I'm glad you just said that because that is my fucking mentality with everything. Because
you're
being
hard
an
on
athlete,
yourself.
it's like
Mike's
I didn't
very
push.
hard on himself.
I'm hard on myself. I didn't push hard enough. So that is really interesting to come into it with that mindset.
With boxing, or I mean, I do combat sport, not at a professional level, but like I roll with Tim Kennedy and guys who do it, like so like I at least understand that. I can see why that mindset, why people who are like that are attracted to those sports, because that mindset pays off in those sports.
Fucking A.
Totally, right? Yep. So I'm not saying that's a bad mindset. That mindset definitely has a place. I'm very much that type too. I learned, you can learn the hard way if you want. I learned the hard way that mindset only hurts in terms of healing. Because what that mindset is about, it boiled for me. The go harder mindset boiled down to I'm not enough. Like if you really go deep underneath all of it,
fucking A.
I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And that's actually the thing I'm trying to heal. So using the adaptation to I'm not enough to heal I'm not enough does not work. That's a snake eating its own tail.
I love that analogy.
Don't
that
be a
really
snake
I mean,
tail,
I've been thinking about this since I retired. That's why I started fighting at a young age. Why I got good at sports was I felt like I wasn't enough, and when I won, I felt like I was enough for a brief period,
Yes.
and then I'd be
and
fucking
then you got to get
depressed,
back on chasing it,
and then I'd chase it again, and it was just a roller coaster.
Think about it. I mean,
I still struggle with it.
An Ouroboros that's what you call the snake eating its own tail. If a snake's starving and it starts eating its own tail, is that going to actually say it might not be hungry for a little while, but is that going to no?
Yeah,
it doesn't work. It's eating. You are doing the same. I was doing the same thing, right? Yeah. And so like the thing I had to learn, and I learned it the hard way. I kept pushing and pushing. That's why I did so many sessions the first year, because like I was pushing harder, right? And on one hand, I had so much trauma to deal with that it was kind of okay, but on the other hand, it was like, I had to go through that phase. But I could have learned a lot earlier that if the thing I'm trying to heal is you're not enough, the path to that is not to push into it. The path to that is to actually do the opposite of pushing into it.
Surrender.
Surrender, but then what gets there is acceptance, compassion, empathy. None of those align with harder, faster, more. And again, not that that's wrong or bad. There are places where that works, where it makes sense. Being compassionate and empathic and gentle does not work in fighting. You're gonna die. Okay, cool. Then you got different skill sets for different worlds, and that's not right or wrong or bad or good. It's just understand where they go. Does that make sense?
Yep, 100%.
I feel like that's what will come up for you in MDMA is working through the compassion and giving yourself unconditional love. Like I'm good enough and I'm awesome or insert in whatever, regardless of what I do. It's just who you already are. Right. And I feel like that comes up for a lot of high achieving men who are like, must do more, be more. So I am loved in society. Because if I'm not valuable in society, I'll die. It's like a cycle of enoughness.
No, it's not just I'm valuable in society. I am not enough.
To yourself.
I am not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever. I'm not enough. It's not even to society. Wow. That is a level, but beneath that is not enough. Period.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Just as a whole.
Tucker, one of the things.
This was a great therapy session.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate it.
We'll
Venmo you for therapy later.
We can keep going on this. If you guys want to go on this line, we can go on this line. Like I've walked this path.
I want to do MDMA now. Well, let's go right now.
that is the path that I'm currently walking. Right. I mean, it's very, very similar.
When did you do your psilocybin sessions?
In February of this year. I had done a similar type of thing. It was a combination of, they start with sassafras, then we were taking psilocybin and a combination of ayahuasca. It's called Ma. I'd done that about 2 or 3 times before. And so the first time I'd ever done plant medicine was in 2019. I had just signed a contract fight for the world title. I was my 22nd fight. My body and soul was broken. The only fucking reason I was staying fighting was because I felt like it wasn't enough. Money, wrong reasons. That was the first time in my life after that plant medicine that I gave myself permission to retire. And it wasn't MDMA. You know, I'm not sure exactly what caused it, but I woke up the next morning, or I came to, and I was like, I'm done. I'm good. I can retire. And I did. I retired after that fight. So I do credit that experience for giving me a profound moment to quit something that was literally fucking killing me. But I will say I've had other experiences that weren't quite as profound, or I felt like maybe I was escaping something. And I've never done the full MDMA, and I've always been something has made me gravitate towards it to the point where I read Dose of Hope.
I like, listen, man, I like, there's a lot of people in this space that say a lot of things. And in my experience, not the majority of them, but a lot of them, there's a good number of them don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And especially people early on, right? If someone's intention is to heal trauma, there is nothing more effective in all ways, whether it's safe, gentle, actually works, etc., than MDMA. Like, that's the thing, for that, right? If that's, when you get to the point when I got to when I got to the point where I was sick of suffering, and I was sick of my bullshit, and I got serious about healing, MDMA, right? And I did, now, again, not a magic pill, right? But it sounds like you've done a lot of work already, right? And so, which I think it's the more work you do prior to starting plant medicine, generally off the better it goes, right? Although I know people who went in having done no work, and it absolutely dropped a bomb on their life, but then they use that as the impetus to really start laying their foundation of integration and really doing all the work, and they're doing amazing now. I know others who kind of came in unprepared, dropped a bomb, and like, fuck this, I'm not doing this again. This is, because what it shows them essentially, especially those people, is that everything in their life is bullshit, and they've constructed this bullshit edifice to run from their shit, and then they have a decision to make. Am I going to turn and face the truth, or am I going to double down on my edifice of bullshit? Right? It sounds to me like you've already made the decision to kind of face your stuff, right? If that's the case, MDMA is almost always the best next step, because, like, especially if what you were saying, you hate all the spiritual bypass people and the people putting on airs. MDMA, none of those people do MDMA, especially MDMA alone. Almost none of them.
Well, I like the alone factor.
No, because they do it at parties, but not
right. They do
I've
it
only
at
done
parties.
it in, like,
they
group
do it
settings.
in groups,
Burning Man.
Or they just don't do it, or they mix it with other things.
Right.
Because if you really want to heal and you really want to face your shit, and you go in with that mindset, MDMA is going to present your shit to you. It's not going to shove it in your face. It's going to say, okay, if you're ready, I'll bring it. But it's sort of like it's like a cat. Right? Like
Mike loves cats.
He
hates cats.
I hate cats too.
No, now he's gonna be thinking about cats during MDMA.
No. See, I forget who is metaphor. Like the difference between like a cat and a dog, right? You go up to a dog and you ruffle it and come on, buddy, and it's very engaging, right? That's almost like mushrooms. Dogs have their own energy and they have their own thing, and they want to do their own thing, but you can go and mess with them and you can play with them, and MDMA is more like a cat, where it's like, you kind of just hold your hand down, and then when the cat's ready, the cat comes over, and then the cat ready, and then you can start scratching it or whatever. And if you treat it like a dog, it runs off, right? If you force MDMA, doesn't work so well, right? If you try and push into it, doesn't work so well. If you want to distract yourself, you can, right? You totally could. The way I distracted myself, especially my first session, talk blah 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 blah. Like if you decide to do it, you need to have. I would very much recommend you have a guide who knows you well and is willing to tell you to shut up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And go back in, right? Because I would bet you're gonna blah, 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 talk a lot,
Yeah,
right?
I talk a lot.
Which on MDMA is a distraction.
Yeah.
Now, there's some people who are verbal processors, so if you're kind of talking to yourself, that's different. I was having a conversation, trying to have a conversation with a guide. And
if you're nervous, that's a way to calm the nerves.
It's a distraction.
Yeah, distraction.
No, it's not calming the nerves. It's feeding the anxiety. I don't want to face my stuff, so I'm going to talk to you, blah, 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 blah. And my guide, it's funny, my guide was having a lot of problems with me, and my wife was there, and she was like, shut up. Put your fucking eye mask on. Yeah. And because she knows me really well, she's like, you are distracting yourself and you're avoiding your stuff. Put your eye mask on and go back in. That's why you're here. And I'm like, fuck, you're right. And so, anyway, so the point is MDMA requires you to go in with intention and surrender. But if you do that, all the stuff comes up. Like if you actually surrender, which is for guys like us who are doers, it's a very hard thing to not feel like you're not doing anything and instead have stuff done to you. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Even though it's not really what's going on, it is your body. It's all, everything is, with mushrooms have their own intelligence and their own stuff. MDMA does not. That's why it being synthetic is so great, because the only shit going on is what's in you. Oh. What comes up is what's in you. Whereas on Aya or mushrooms, what comes up can be its own stuff, right? And having done it, you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. I've never thought of it like that. That makes so much sense.
Well, that's why MDMA is so great. Now, it's a downside too. If you're trying to reach enlightenment, mind expansion, MDMA is not the way to go, right? You definitely want mushrooms or Aya or something like that.
For creativity.
Right, exactly. For
like that.
It's different tools for different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about the come down a little bit. If you do it with a professional who knows what they're doing, they assist you the next day with 5-HTP or there's because I assume the next day you could be really sad.
Yes, totally. Not sad necessarily. Drained.
Like a dump of
totally, because you literally you did dump your serotonin, right? And so the protocol that I use is actually in Dose of Hope, because I just took Dan's protocol because he's amazing, and basically it's if I remember correctly. Like the day before, you take a bunch of vitamin C and magnesium and maybe something else.
5-HTP?
No.
Okay.
No, 5-HTP is not part of his. No. Maybe. I think Dan uses GABA right before the MDMA to help. Not all guides do. Some guides do. The thing I do after, tons of magnesium and like magnesium chloride, the spray stuff, right, which only goes through skin, and magnesium threonate and glycinate, both. Like it really does drain the magnesium in you, and most people are magnesium deficient to begin with.
Yeah, for sure.
And so magnesium is very important, but then also SAMe is much better than 5-HTP. It re-stimulates.
I like that.
And I'll tell you the protocol that a lot of guides use, not all, but I really like, is MDMA. Like let's say like 9 a.m. you take MDMA, and then you're done by like 12 to 1, right? Because it's about 4 hours.
Oh, it's short.
And 4 hours, right? It's almost exactly 4 hours. You can feel it when it doesn't go away totally, but when it kind of stops. The big impact, it's the weirdest thing. It's like a light switch goes off and you can feel it. But then often you just keep going because you're still open, right? It's still having an impact. 30 minutes to an hour after you kind of feel that light switch go off, I will take 500 milligrams, like a half gram of mushrooms. It's not enough to have a mushroom experience. It's more than it's 10 times as much as a microdose. Right. But not enough to have a sort of a mushroomy experience. What I've found for me, what that does is that first off, mushrooms are a serotonin antagonist. Like they stimulate serotonin production, so it helps you recover. But also, it creates a lot of neuroplasticity. And so all the stuff that came up on MDMA, and a lot will probably come up for you, just a little half gram, and it helps you sort of be open enough to then, and you kind of keep working on it, but from a totally different angle, right? It's imagine like having a drill sergeant therapist and then like a sweet school marm therapist, like like having two different ones back to back. You're working on the same issue from a different angle, right? And so that works really well. Not necessary, but I like doing that. But really it's SAMe and magnesium.
So in a healthy brain, you should bounce back within a few days.
Oh, yeah.
And unless you're doing this, for the people who do it every weekend at parties, they're
Well,
messing up their
dose,
serotonin.
yeah,
But if I did
course.
it once or twice a year in a
You can do it every
proper
quarter.
setting
Every quarter easily.
to heal, and I have a healthy brain, very healthy brain, it should be fine. It's not like, oh my gosh, my serotonin's ruined. No.
4 times a year, every quarter, no problem at all. Like now, certain people going more aggressive than that, like I did, but I also had like, I knew my brain could handle it, et cetera, et cetera. I took all the right supplements. You can honestly not do shit and do it once a quarter and be fine.
Yeah.
That's more. The question is not the brain issues and the body issues. The question is the emotional integration, right? So like, I don't do a lot. So my year of grief, as I call it, the year before I'd done like, I think 8 total medicines or 6 sessions. I think I did only like 3 or 4 that year. I did like half as much as I did the year because 1, I was more experienced at dealing with my emotions, but 2, man, like a lot of shit would come up, and like I needed 6 months after one session, or it was 5 months. I needed 5 months to put myself back to fucking together. Like I was a disastrous puddle of a mess. When the session I took I needed time. Right? And sometimes it's time, sometimes it's just like you're repatterning yourself. Like if you have a certain set of triggers, like if when a woman says something, you get angry because it reminds you need time. It's not just feeling the emotions from the first time your mom said that is the initial trigger. It's repatterning. Yeah. Right? Because you've got that neural pathway that's so carved in. You've been doing it for 30, 40 years. It's very rare to reverse those things overnight, even with high mushroom doses, right? But the thing with it, that's why I like to pair. I don't ever take anything, mushrooms with MDMA. MDMA first, then when it's done, a tiny dose of mushrooms, just because that actually helps me reset patterns.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. You're putting super glue on the neurons.
It's why LSD is also repatterning. It's why it works well with MDMA, but I would not recommend combining those until you have done MDMA a few times. Yeah. And you kind of know you have an idea of what's there trauma-wise. And most people, myself included, stuck with just MDMA. It's funny, I was just MDMA at the beginning, and then I went pretty deep into all the sort of deep-end psychedelics, and I did all of them except Iboga. I came back to MDMA. Like my last 2 sessions have been just MDMA, and followed by a tiny bit of psilocybin, because now I've gotten so good at feeling my emotions and so experienced with it. I've learned to surrender. And when I say good, that's what I mean. Is like, I've gotten good at not trying to push it and not trying to do it, but accept and surrender and receive. Yeah. And which is so funny to say, practice. I got to practice surrendering and receiving, but I needed a lot of practice with that, man. And so now one MDMA session will last me 3 to 6 months. Stuff comes up, and then I feel it, process it. It's not just feeling it that once. Oftentimes for me, it's like I got to come back to it several times. And I got to really. Because there's so much to feel sometimes, not with everything. There will be plenty of things where it's like, oh yeah, I dealt with, my dog died, I dealt with that once, it's gone. And there's going to be other things like my mom didn't want me and there's a lot of emotions there. There's decades of emotion, You
sold?
I'm ready. Do you have some on you right now? Let's go in the guest room. Give me the blindfold.
I do not guide people for obvious reasons. Like
okay, we came over to do the good stuff. So
obviously, of course, I can refer guides to you guys. There's some good ones in Austin, some really good ones that I know that are MDMA specific, MDMA and mushroom specific. I mean,
it's beautiful. It makes me feel hopeful for people who. I mean, this can change people's lives.
Yeah, it does. I'm excited for people to hear this.
What a gift. It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Changed my life.
Right.
I know there's a lot of stigma around it, but if it can help people, why are we so weird about it? Like this is incredible that this exists.
Well, just having conversations like this, I think really, really helps.
I'm excited. I know Mike's going to do it. Mike's braver than me.
Honestly, it's scary. Look, it is scary.
It is
you
fucking
go first.
Scary.
No,
you go down the slide first.
It's scary to feel the emotions you've run from your whole life.
Fuck yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Man, the people I know who go in, it's no problem. Those are almost never the ones who have I don't want to say shouldn't, but those are often the ones that either have the hardest experiences or get nothing from it.
Yeah.
You know, because I've definitely had, they just push it away. Oh yeah, I guess it was okay. You know, nothing, whatever, right? And some of those people like won't do anything. Like a year later, they'll come back and like, Jesus Christ, it had a huge impact on me. I mean, I had no idea at the time. But it's not only is it okay to be scared, I think it's kind of healthy.
Sure.
That just means that you
care.
That you have good expectations. You have proper aligned expectations, and it probably means you're a healthy amount of fear means you're ready. Because like I always teach my kids, I could bring my kids in here right now. I could tell them, you know, what's fear? Fear is I'm afraid. What's courage? Courage is knowing you're afraid and doing it anyway.
And still fucking doing it.
Yeah.
Not the absence of fear.
Have you ever done it with Veronica? Like, do people ever sit together?
We have not.
So you never suggest people do it together, like couples or siblings?
Yes and no.
Experiential episode, Mike?
No. Okay, so here's the thing. People come all the time and they're like, oh, my wife and I are having issues. You know, we want to do MDMA together. I actually, for almost everyone, it's probably not, I'm not going to say no, because it's not up to me. It's up to them, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't really think that's the best situation. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm a believer that there is no such thing as a relationship problem. There are just individual problems that intersect with relationships, right? And so like with my wife and I, like she has baggage and I have baggage. Our relationship does not, right? Like now, when sometimes she'll bring her baggage in the relationship, and like if I don't have any baggage that overlaps with that, it's not really that big of a deal, and vice versa. But when her baggage intersects with my baggage, that's when we get explosive shit, right? And I've seen this happen, not with us, but with other people, doing MDMA together, like you're not trying to deal with the intersection of the baggage.
Right.
That's not the problem.
Right.
The problem is your baggage or her baggage or his baggage, right? And so I do my sessions and I do my work. And what I've found is the more I do my work, the less issues we have in our relationship.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that, so like now, you can definitely, and I know couples who, like you can get to a point where you've each individually done your own work and you want to do this to connect more or as experience. Yeah, that's fine. That's more of a mind expansion, sensuous enhancement, connection type thing. It's not bad. It's just I'd be very hesitant to do couple stuff for therapy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do it separately, yeah.
Right.
So we're calling the show The Best Medicine.
Yeah.
One of the things we've asked every single guest, and you'd be shocked. We had breathwork expert. We have all these different people come on, and sometimes it's what you think, sometimes not. But everyone knows, the phrase "the best medicine." But do you have something in your life that you feel like has been the best medicine for you, or an initial thought when I even say that term, the best medicine?
All right. So obviously, psychedelics have been amazing medicine for me, right? So that's. But if I had to pick a best, this might be a weird answer, but I have come to pretty recently, within the last maybe 6 months, I have come to the not just the understanding, but the deep realization and internalization that everything in my life is a result of my thoughts. Right? Not that like I'm thinking this table into existence, but that, and I can go deep into this physics of that. I can go deep into the metaphysics of that. But so given that belief, to me, the best medicine is all psychedelics are a tool to help me get access to as much of myself and my thoughts as possible. So for me, the best medicine recently has been really diving into and accessing and understanding and then programming, essentially, as much as I can, my own thoughts and beliefs. And the more I do that, the healthier I am and the better everything is.
It's a great answer.
That was that was probably the best one we've got so far.
You control your thoughts, you control your life.
Not just control. That's a funny thing you bring that up. See, because like a lot of people... I
would say control, right?
Yes. No, I used to think that way too. I got to control my emotions. No, that belief in me was not serving me. It served me for a while. But it stopped serving me, and I realized what I needed to do was feel my emotions and understand my emotions, and then learn how to deal with and live with my emotions, not control. Because control is like, oh, I'm feeling shame. I don't want to feel that. Push that away. Or put it in a box or tell it to go away. That's control, right? You can do that for a while. You know how that ends up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like understanding or recognizing I'm feeling shame, accepting, okay, I am feeling shame, investigating it, looking at it, understanding why, and then like really non-judgmentally allowing that shame to kind of have its say, right? That to me has been a far more effective approach than trying to control. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Damn.
Mic drop.
That was a good response.
This was great, man.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
this was probably my favorite so far.
Well, how many episodes have you done? That was like
15?
1.
Oh, 15.
We're on
This is the first one. By far my favorite. That should be the answer.
no,
one of
I'm
one.
serious. It has been for sure.
This is awesome.
Yeah. It was fascinating. I'm sold.
and I think especially too with when I was reading Dose of Hope, what I thought was cool about it is like, and this story, you can find pieces of yourself in that story, for instance, in that book,
100%.
right? And I'm sure people listening can find pieces of themselves in what we're talking about. So,
Yeah.
awesome.
You keep saying I'm sold. You know who sold you today, right?
Myself.
Yes. No, it's true.
God.
No, I don't know if I got you.
Yeah.
Maybe God. I don't know. Like,
Who knows who it is?
Yeah.
You should listen to that. I mean,
Well,
because you've had a lot of anxious energy around doing this,
Yeah.
or plant medicine in general.
Usually for me, my curiosity and my anxiety dance together. And so sometimes the curiosity shows up as anxiety, but it's actually a little bit of excitement.
But dude,
so then I play with it.
understand.
You're like
those two.
Dad. You don't want to be out of control.
No,
think
I
that's a
don't
big-
mind. I actually don't mind that because I've done that one mini journey with Clay.
Yeah.
So now I'm not as afraid.
Right.
What I am afraid of is I get too much in my head about the science of serotonin and what would happen after and what if I must. But hearing him be like, it's not a big deal. It's fine. Like I just need that
dying or getting
reassurance.
hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to know I'm not the one girl in the world who died from it.
Yeah.
But that's a control issue. You're right. That's
You're not
me.
on SSRIs, right?
No, I've never been in my life. I'm not. I've
you'd be
taken Tylenol maybe 5 times. So I'm like,
What if you have taken SSRIs like years
As
ago?
long as you've been off, I think it's. I mean, you should check with a doctor. I think it's like a month.
Okay.
oh, Mike, you've
okay.
been off for years now. Right?
They had me on Lexapro for years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
It did
no, it's
fucking
fine.
nothing.
Fine.
I mean, I got off of it.
Fine.
Yeah, no, it's just the feeling of hyper control around wellness of I need to be safe, I need to be healthy, but like where is that from, right? And maybe that's the work I need to do. Like why am I so afraid to be hurt? Okay, if something happened, I need to realize that I'm going to be okay because I'm always okay. Like that is it's the internal. I don't feel
Not
safe.
realize. Feel.
That I'd be okay.
I bet you're very similar to me. I would bet. Who knows? You're not going to learn a lot of MDMA. You're going to feel a lot. Not everyone's like that. There are
would be
definitely
nice.
some people who like discover a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't discover intellectually. I discovered almost nothing. Very, very little. Maybe 10% was like a new realization or a new insight, or 80 to 90% for me was feeling into what I already knew.
Wow. Because that's what happened with the journey I did. I went in thinking I'm going to be super creative. I'm going to channel source. I'm going to see God. None of that happened. I sat in a bed and I felt like a stick of butter and I just felt bliss and I stared at a wall by myself for 5 hours and it was great. And that's what I needed. I didn't need to go and like channel source. You know what I mean? So it's like setting that expectation of almost my ego was like, I'm going to come out and be like writing a book or something. That's not what happened. I was like, I'm a stick of butter and I just kept like shaking. And
That's
it felt
trauma.
so good.
That's
it felt
trauma
so
coming
good though.
That's
It was like
somatic release.
yeah, it was like warm and it just felt like, oh, life is so good. I just kept like going like this in my legs. I was all by myself, which Clay thinks is funny because I'm such an extrovert as I gave myself the identity. Didn't want to talk to anyone. Just loved the feeling of being alone and feeling good. And then it was over. And I'm like, that was it. That was my experience. I didn't like see God. I just felt good for 5 hours and appreciated how awesome it is to be a human and feel good. And that was it. But maybe that was the lesson of like, it's okay just to be, and it's okay just to be grateful that you feel good. And then whatever the shaking thing was.
And you're still alive.
Right? Yeah. Then I was still alive. Honestly, that was the biggest lesson is that I woke up and I was like, oh, we're not woke up, or I came out of it and I was like, oh, I'm here. I'm okay. So I trusted some woman to hand me a pill and I took it. And that for me was a big deal because I had to trust her. I've never met her. Right? Like, come on, when you're a kid with the DARE program, here's a pill, take it. Like, no. Like, that's scary. I didn't even know her. So I think that in itself was one of the lessons for me was like, trusting someone who hands you a pill, even though that sounds really sketchy, and we don't advise that to anyone listening. But so yeah.
And now you're healed, and here we are.
Now I'm a shaman in Austin. So if you want to work with me,
yeah,
I'm Austin's top shaman. This was awesome.
Thanks again, Tucker.
Of course.
Appreciate it.